You're listening to the Paranormal UK Radio Network. Hello? Is that the famous astronomer, Sir Patrick Moore?
It is, very much so.
Any news on the space front?
Quite so. Elon Musk has just designed and developed 5 gigantic, state-of-the-art rocket ships. All members of Parliament, along with the American Senate, have first-class tickets aboard them, you see. They're told they're going to the moon.
Told? Where exactly are they going, Sir Patrick?
The new anomaly discovered recently astronomically. A huge black hole.
Welcome to Twin Souls. Twin Souls is brought to you in association by the Paranormal UK Radio Network. Your hosts, Philip and Ronald Kinsella. Today's guest is Kathleen Marden.
Kathleen Marden is a leading ufologist, author, lecturer, TV host to many of the top-rated UFO programs and radio stations. She has a BA degree in social work and is also a certified practitioner of regression hypnosis, applying aspects of the quantum healing hypnosis technique. Kathleen was awarded Ufologist of the Year by the Mutual UFO Network, where she sits as one of the world's most respected researchers within her field. Her auntie and uncle had been Betty and Barney Hill, the famous couple who'd been abducted in New Hampshire in 1961, and of which Kathleen, along with her late friend, colleague, and co-author, nuclear physicist Stanton Friedman, published entitled Captured: The Betty and Barney UFO Experience. Considered a world-leading pioneer within her field, Kathleen is here to talk about her latest book, along with her work, Extraterrestrial Contact: What to Do When You've Been Abducted.
Captured, the 60th anniversary is now available to order.
It's an honor to have you back with us on the program, Kathleen.
Thank you. It's nice to be back with you.
Yes, and we know that you've released a new book, Extraterrestrial Contact: What to Do When You've Been Abducted. We just wanted to ask, first of all, Kathleen, what inspired you to write this particular book? Because we know that you're the author of many other books, but what was it about this book that got you to write it?
Well, I am the Mutual UFO Network's Director of Experiencer Resources, and we have so many experiencers from around the world coming to our team of 45 specialists who speak to experiencers on a day-to-day basis. But those people on my team can only give a certain amount of time because MUFON is a very busy organization. So I thought about how I could help experiencers, and the idea of writing Extraterrestrial Contact came up, and I initially intended for it to be a fairly small book called something like the Experiencer's Handbook. But then it was picked up by a large publishing company who titled it differently. They said that who would know what experiencers means? And I thought, well, yes, in the general public. So they retitled the book Extraterrestrial Contact: What to Do When You've Been Abducted. And it is a comprehensive guide on contact and abduction, and has a worksheet sheet at the end of every chapter that experiencers can use in order to help them to heal or help with what they want to do. So I have 3 women who contributed a chapter or 2, brilliant women who wrote about their own specializations. And we have Ann Castle, who's brilliant, and she wrote, "This is my reality. What now?" So she goes through the stages from denying that this ever happened to coming to the point where you say, yes, I can't deny it any longer. I have this evidence. I know that it happened. And then you step back again and tell yourself, no, maybe it didn't happen. And then, of course, you go forward and finally you accept the fact that it did happen to you. And she talks about all of the steps that you go through until the point where you accept it and you can integrate it into your personality and your knowledge that, yes, indeed, this did occur. We also have Maddie Tobias. And Maddie wrote a chapter on how to cope with contact with non-human entities. Maddie spent her career as a psychotherapist working with veterans who were suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, and also with people who had joined cults and wanted to get out of being in a cult. So another brilliant woman, and I think that you'll enjoy her chapter as well, because she talks about coping with what has occurred in your life. And then we have Denise Stoner, and she is a lifelong experiencer. She was my co-author on the book, The Alien Abduction Files. And she wrote about ghosts and the paranormal phenomena, and also angels, demons, and parasites. Do these entities exist? So she is on the ERT. In fact, she's my personal assistant, and she is our expert on the paranormal in general. And so she has written 2 very important chapters. I've written most of the chapters, but one that you might be interested in is When You Want It to Stop, Coping Strategies and Resistance Techniques. I have a chapter on going public, what you can expect. What do you do if you want to write a book is in it. Also, how to investigate your own contact experiences. So, and the social research that has been done on experiencers and abductees and what those findings have been. So the book is chock full of information for experiencers, abductees, and those who love them or people who are just interested in this topic.
Yes, Kathleen, that is incredible. We have the book, and it is an amazing book.
Yes, I was just going to say, Kathleen, that what you've just stated from this book of yours is, I think you've covered quite everything there. I mean, the angels and demons as well, and also the fact of if you want to withdraw from a cult. This is great.
Yes. And thank you for your kind comments. That is what I had intended to do when I imagined what this book would be and recognized the need for it. There's no book out there like this book.
No, that's right. And, because you're such an esteemed personality and soul within the UFO movement, as it were, your help and your expertise is most incredible. And, I can attest to the fact that people can seek out Kathleen and her team if they want some real help. Well, these guys certainly know how to do it. But I wanted to ask also, because a lot of people have been asking me, if you can explain, please, Kathleen, the process of quantum healing hypnosis, because this is fascinating. So are you able to explain the process involved?
Yes, I absolutely can. Well, when a person makes an appointment with me for quantum healing hypnosis, I ask them to write down about 10 questions that they would like to have answered. And so we set up the appointment, they bring the questions, and I don't address them right away. We talk for 3 or 4 hours about that individual's life, about the way they grew up, their education, their family members, their marriage, or if they aren't married, their life, their children, whatever it is. And we also talk in detail about all of the memories that they have of UFO abduction or contact, and then we go over the questions. This takes anywhere from 3 to 5 hours. And by that time, I think that we feel very comfortable with one another. And I take the individual out of the waiting room part of my office. I have only one person in there and a very comfortable couch and snacks and drinks and that kind of thing. And then we go into a bedroom area where there is a bed, and the person can lie down on very comfortably with a pillow and a nice blanket to cover them with. And I begin the hypnotic induction, which is extremely enjoyable. The induction probably takes about 45 minutes, maybe less, and the person becomes more and more relaxed as time goes on through that induction. And then we begin with the hypnosis itself. And with that, I use what is called a forensic method of hypnosis. The forensic method is the type of method that police stations use, the law enforcement uses, because if they want to know more about an incident that occurred, it would not stand up in a court of law, or if the person was given suggestive material that would cause them to confabulate during hypnosis. The technique that I use is a technique so that the individual will have the clearest and most accurate account of what occurred that they could possibly have in hypnosis. So I take many, many steps to prevent confabulation from occurring. Misremembered details, or something that they've seen on a movie or something they've learned in a book. We don't want any of that there. So that's how I begin. That's not part of the technique that Dolores Cannon developed. Her technique was to take a person to that place and ask many, many questions. I don't do that because it encourages confabulation, as I said. So we will begin with a specific time frame where that experiencer has a memory of what occurred. Not an entire memory, but at least the beginning of it and maybe the end of it as well. And through their talking, where I will just ask them, well, that's what happened next as they go along. Then we'll get to the point where they actually will remember the date accurately, what they did during that day. And that's the most important thing to me, is for a person to begin on the day that occurred, maybe in the morning of that day, what they did throughout the day until they actually had this experience with a UFO and non-human entities. And we'll go through that as best as that person is able. And during that time, if there's any kind of emotional outburst or trauma, anxiety that is released, I will also give the person suggestions that will calm them, that will take them to, if they want to go, to a safe place where they can feel very warm and comfortable. I did this, I'm thinking about Calvin Parker, who with Charlie Hickson was abducted in Pascagoula, Mississippi. And Calvin loves to fish. So whenever he was uncomfortable, I would take him to a fishing boat that was just rocking gently on the ocean, and it was nice and safe, and he was very comfortable. So that's a technique that I use, and then when that person is ready to go back, then we'll go back to where they were, and that person can continue. The only questions that I ask are based upon what they have just told me. So I don't lead the witness at all. We get through that hypnosis session that can last for up to 2 hours, and then we go to what is kind of speaking to their higher self, where where all the Akashic records are held regarding their life. And we address the higher self. The person often talks in the third person when we reach that point. And I ask for permission to speak to that person's higher self or super consciousness, and receive permission and ask those questions that the experiencer has. And we go through that, and then I offer them a rapid induction technique, suggestions for that. So if they wish to come back again, I can just use that rapid induction technique, say those particular words, and they'll go into a deep trance immediately. If they want healing, before I do that rapid induction technique, I would ask the super consciousness or the higher self to go over the person's body, would start at the head and go down through the chakras of the body, and that super consciousness would stop at each point where there is a problem in the individual's body and work on that area to clear out any problems that are there, to send healing to the cells, and so that that person will be on the road to healing. And amazingly, that's been highly successful. I make an audio tape or audio recording of this, the entire hypnosis. And if the person is healing, but maybe an hour, a year later, they have a relapse, they can listen to that tape again, and they will be back on the road to healing. So it's very good. And then when we get beyond the rapid induction part, I bring them up very gently out of hypnosis with some very nice suggestions that will make them feel very comfortable and safe, and that this was in the past. We will leave it in the past. There's no reason to obsess on it or to feel uncomfortable with it at all. And then I bring them up, and that's it.
Kathleen, I love the way you prevent contamination during this process without leading them on. I love that as well, because I can see the steps you're taking, the measures you take to ensure complete accuracy, or as best you can, accuracy to gain a picture of what actually happened to them in reality. So I think that's wonderful, wonderful. I think this forensic, it's almost forensic, isn't it, how you do it?
It is, yes. Forensic hypnosis is what it's called.
So what I wanted to ask you, Kathleen, that is absolutely incredible. And people, your listeners will get a picture here, because as you and we know that with regards to the UFO abduction experience, it comes in varied levels that we're still trying to understand. But one of the burning questions I wanted to ask you was that what drove you, Kathleen, into doing this kind of work? What was it that spurred you on with your interest in abductees, contactees, experiences?
It was my aunt and uncle's experience initially. And of course, the skeptics and disinformants attempted to state and convince everyone over and over again through the years that this was not real, that it was only a fantasy. And I wanted to know, was this really a fantasy that Betty and Barney had? I read everything that all of the skeptics had stated. I even went to an archival collection at the American Philosophical Society in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where some of the greatest anti-UFO propagandists of the 20th century had their archival collections, and I read those archival collections too. I really wanted to ascertain whether or not this was a real experience and what actually happened to Betty and Barney. So that's where I started out. I wanted to also ask scientists to examine Betty's dress, to do tests on the dress she was wearing that night that had tears in several places and that had a pink powdery substance that deposited on it, because the last test on that dress had been back in the 1970s. And I began my search in 1990. So I knew that there were more techniques. There was DNA analysis, and we had moved ahead technologically. So that was something that I wanted to do as well. And I was extraordinarily interested in the type of hypnosis that Dr. Benjamin Simon used with Betty and Barney when he took both of them separately. Each of them separately. And they went through an hour of hypnosis, and then he reinstated amnesia so that they would not remember what each of them said, and they wouldn't contaminate one another's information that way. Also, there were points where Betty and Barney both had outbursts, highly emotionally charged outbursts. They were very fearful. And he didn't want them to remember that all at once, because if they did, it could increase the level of anxiety or trauma. So he was very careful in the way he conducted his hypnosis. And he worked with each of them for a period of 4 months, and then he worked with the two of them together for another 2 months as they listened to the tapes, listened to what one another said, and then were able to integrate that information and accept what actually did happen, which was a close encounter with a UFO that they always remembered. Even in the early reports, Barney remembered observing non-human entities on board the craft as he stood in a field looking up at them through binoculars. So they had a great deal of conscious recall about a very close encounter with a craft that, my gosh, all of these disinformants were saying never occurred, that they had traveled, they saw a light in the sky, and Betty had some dreams and convinced Barney they were real. That is just not what occurred. Yet, those who wanted to dismiss alien abduction worked very hard to cause the public around the world to believe that what happened to Betty and Barney was different than what actually did happen. And, that's why I did this. I went to all of the archival records. I investigated this myself. I even drove with my husband at the same time of the year, in the same time frame that Betty and Barney drove in, from Niagara Falls to Toronto to Montreal over a couple of days. We did what Betty and Barney did in Montreal, just sightseeing, and then we headed for the state of New Hampshire. And I just wanted to know if we would be hallucinating by the time we reached the part where Betty and Barney saw the UFO and had the close encounter, because one of the disinformants was stating that Betty and Barney were hallucinating at that time. And I have to tell you, my husband and I were 20 years older than Betty and Barney were in 1961 when they had their experience, and we were not hallucinating. So I could claim that no, they were not hallucinating. So there was just so much. I wanted to do a case study, and I did. And I did not want to hold the book up by doing my own investigation of Marjorie Fish's star map. Betty had observed a star system on that craft. She said to the examiner after her physical examination, no, she said to not the examiner had left the room. She said to the leader, that she called him the leader, he was her escort, that she knew that he wasn't from around these parts. Where was he from? And he produced this sort of three-dimensional star map. And she looked up into it, and there were many stars that were connected by lines. The two in the foreground were about the size of nickels, connected by several solid lines. And then there were solid lines that went up to other stars. And then there were dotted lines that went to stars that were of greater distance. And so Marjorie Fish, who was a brilliant woman from Ohio, worked for several years in an attempt to identify the stars on Betty's map. And at first she thought she would identify many. In the end, she did not find any star systems like that until 1972. When a new catalog was published, she was able to copy the distance data in that. There were new stars that hadn't been in the previous distance data, out 55 light years from the sun. She changed the stars on her most recent map. She had made 14 in all, using monofilament line and beads and wooden frame. And so she did this finally with the new distance data after she did all the math to know where to put everything. And there it was, a match for Betty's map. And the most extraordinary thing about that is that the stars on Betty's map were all sun-like stars, those connected by solid lines. And all of the sun-like stars in that volume of space were on Betty's map. So the astronomers who took this seriously thought that it was extraordinary. And that was just another piece of evidence. But Stanton Friedman had been the researcher who knew the most about that star map. He'd written about it. He'd met with Marjorie Fish. He had done a film about it. And so I went to Stanton. And I had known him for many years through my Aunt Betty. And I told him what I was doing and asked him if he would like to join me. And he said, well, I'd like to come visit you and see what you have. And so he did. And when he looked over the manuscript that I'd written and the materials that I had, I'm the trustee of Betty's estate. So I had all of her archival records, which are now in an archival collection at the University of New Hampshire, her alma mater, and mine as well. And so Stanton agreed finally to contribute to my book, and he made a very good contribution. And so I was just delighted. And after I learned so much about Betty's and Barney's experience, I wanted to know more. And I remembered a missing time event that my mother had when I was probably around 12, 13, 14 years old. One night where she had gone grocery shopping and just never came home. And she had frozen food. She had ice cream in the car. And by the time she arrived home, it was late. My father was beside himself with worry. None of us children were able to sleep because we were worried. And she came in not realizing that she was missing time. And so I wanted to know about that too. All that frozen food had melted. So something happened to my mother as well. And we had met with Dr. James Harder, who was an abduction investigator from the University of California at Berkeley back in the 1970s. And I knew about that as well. But I started my serious research on pretty much a full-time basis in 1990, and I wanted to know all there was to know about the history of government involvement in the investigation of UFOs, all there was to know about these debunkers, skeptics, and disinformants, and about other people who had had the same experiences, because I had a few experiences, memories, as well. And that sort of launched me into the direction of joining the Mutual UFO Network, becoming an investigator, doing my own investigations, talking with what is probably a couple of thousand experiencers 31 years later, and just continue to learn and to write. I've worked on 3 major studies with experiencers. The first was only 75 people, pretty small, 50 experiencers and a 25-person control group. We had 45 questions. Then I worked on the Edgar Mitchell Free Foundation's research study on experiencers. They now have about 5,000, but when we wrote the book about all of that, Free's book, we had 3,000. And then I went on from 2015 to 2018 to work with some of the better educated people on the team that I set up at the Mutual UFO Network in 2011, and including Dr. Don C. Donderi, who was a research psychologist at McGill University, had recently retired in that time frame, had an interest in UFOs, had done studies with Bud Hopkins, the late pioneer researcher on UFO abductions. And he worked along with me, and members of the team made a major contribution to our study of 516 experiencers. So out of all of that, I've just amassed a huge amount of knowledge and with experiencers, and had the desire I did deep research into hypnosis, and then thought I would like to do hypnosis training as well. So, I think I probably have a PhD in UFO contact at this point in time.
As you're referring to your auntie and uncle, I always believed it. I knew it was true, the incident, because it was so bizarre. The thing that always gets me, the thing that amazes me, and when I read this, I was completely amazed, is when your uncle, the examiners pulled out his false teeth, and then they pull out Betty's under examination. And that's what gets me. It's amazing. That little piece is so amazing because, of course, they would. They were curious of the fact that they could pull his dentures out, but they couldn't pull Betty's.
Right. And, of course, they didn't have teeth at all. So,
no, but it's amazing. Things like that. And, of course, the star map, which was proved to be correct, as you said, yes.
Yes. Yes. So, there's so much there. I did a comparative analysis of Betty's and Barney's statements under hypnosis to determine whether or not she was only repeating 5 dreams that she had, and then Barney repeated them, or if this really did happen. And I discovered that Betty and Barney made many statements that meshed with one another. They were consistent with what the other said, but they were not in Betty's dreams, and in fact sometimes contradicted the material in Betty's dreams.
Yes, and it's a little bit like history repeating itself, Kathleen, because Dr. Benjamin Simon was helping your auntie and uncle, and now you yourself are helping other people. I think that's really incredible. And, the work that you have done, the work that you're doing, the awards that you've received, I mean, it's just incredible. And also, we have to say, a really nice lady that you are, Kathleen. Another question I wanted to ask here. What do you think, Kathleen, is really going on? I mean, what's your analysis of your research? What does it point towards with regard to these episodes or experiences and abductions that people are having? Do you have any clues?
I do. And, I am a researcher who believes that it's very important to do social research with many, many people, rather than just to take the information I've received from experiencers that I've hypnotized or interviewed, because I wanted to have some really good statistical data. And we discovered that experiencers undergo a transformative process where they are different than the general population. And for one thing, experiencers become more intuitive or psychic. Very, very high percentage become more intuitive or psychic than they had been. They become more spiritual. It was 86% among the abductee group who stated that they had become more spiritual as a result of this experience. 95% had become empathic, which means that they are able to experience another person's emotions as if they were their own. And I thought about that, and I thought about what these non-human entities are attempting to do. And they said that the non-humans are empathic as well. And the ETs have told experiencers dating back to, in my own investigations, to 1954, that they are extremely worried about our use of nuclear weapons. I know from the major research that I've done on U.S. government involvement that the Major General who was involved in the UFOs that were seen over Washington, D.C. in 1952, stated that these sightings go back to biblical times. His name was Major General John Alexander Samford. And he said that these craft come back and are seen in the sky about once per century. And then these entities who are in these craft go back to wherever they came from. But in the 1940s, after the detonation of the nuclear weapons, these entities came back and they stayed. They remained here. And back in 1952, the military was attempting to discover why they were here, who they were, and what they intended to do. So they know a lot more about this than many people think they do. But it appears that the majority of these non-humans are benevolent. They seem to be kind. They give information to humans that they're here to assist in our development, that they are taking DNA from humans, and they're taking DNA from all around the world because of the concerns they have about human behavior and this planet. And they're preserving this in case we do destroy this planet. They're also using it to seed other planets. So some of these ETs appear to have lived here on Earth hundreds of thousands of years ago. They say that we had an environmental collapse in that time frame, and that they had the means to leave. Not everyone could, but they left and went to another planet in the Alpha Centauri star system. And we know that different groups are accomplishing different things. And we know that some of them are not as kind to humans, but the more spiritual, more benevolent ETs are keeping them at bay as best they can.
Oh, yes.
Kathleen, I want to ask you your opinion. I've always felt that the planet Mars was definitely inhabited millions of years ago. I believe there used to be a civilization on there until the atmosphere or the stratosphere was shattered. What are your thoughts on Mars and them coming to Earth? What are your thoughts on that, Kathleen?
Well, Dr. John Brandenburg, who was a scientist for NASA, did a study on of the surface of Mars. And what he discovered was that there had been detonations of at least 2 thermonuclear weapons on the planet Mars. And that could have destroyed the atmosphere on Mars if they were large enough. And he believes that there was intelligent life on Mars millions of years ago.
Yes, I do too. I absolutely believe that.
And I love the way, Kathleen, because you're absolutely right. In many cases, what we consider to be, an abduction that's happened in a negative way, you are absolutely spot on with, it changes you as an individual. You become more open, more empathic, more spiritual. And that really warms my heart because from your perspective as a valued researcher and author, it's obvious to see within your work that you believe in a continuation far beyond the physical realm.
Yes, I do. And in fact, I have worked with experiencers who would start out. Let me give you an example of one. There were 2 women who were paranormal researchers, esteemed in the paranormal scientific community for the good work they did. There was a film made about them. They had publications in journals, well-educated women. And Stanton Friedman introduced me to them. He was impressed by them, and they wanted to go to an experiencer's home and carry out some paranormal research. So I set up for them to go to the home of Chris Bledsoe in North Carolina. One of them, the women, lives in North Carolina. And they went, they had their cameras set up, they had their EVP recording equipment and a movie camera that was going, and they were standing with Chris outside, and there was a star next to the moon. The moon was nearly full, and the star started to come in closer, and then it seemed to be coming rapidly. And the next thing they knew, they were standing in the same location, but they were no longer holding their equipment. It was on the ground, and they felt a little nauseated, and they picked everything up and they went back into the house. And Chris's wife was in there, and she said, "Where have you been? I've been looking for you. You weren't out there." And so the women became curious, and they drove the 3 hours that they had to drive to go home. And when they arrived back and they started to think about what happened, they were thinking about what they knew about alien abduction. And one of these women developed post-traumatic stress disorder. And I advised her to see someone who could give her therapy to overcome the post-traumatic stress disorder. And then when she had worked through that, then I would work with her in hypnosis. By the time we ended up conducting the hypnosis sessions, she realized that this was a wonderful experience. She was met by 2 men and 2 women who were in human form. They looked just like humans, only slightly different. Their eyes were a little larger than human eyes. They were just a beautiful example of human beings, and they were very kind. And they gave this paranormal researcher a great deal of information about her long-term relationship with them. They told her that they had known her through all lifetimes, and they would go back and visit her. They told her that they had been visiting her since she was a child. And she knew that her parents had found her outside, locked outside the home when she was a little girl. They had difficulty waking her up in the morning when they found that she was missing. But she thought that there were ghosts in her house. That's all she remembered. And, through hypnosis, she discovered that she had these lifelong experiences. And so she's very pleased now to know that it was positive. And even though she had post-traumatic stress disorder, it was over what she didn't know, not what she discovered.
Wow, that is absolutely awesome. And while we're here, Kathleen, also, you did mention about the re-release of yours and Stanton Friedman's book about Captured. Can you tell your listeners about the new release of this?
Absolutely. This is the 60th anniversary edition of Captured, the Betty and Barney Hill UFO experience, and it is updated. I did not stop my investigation in 2007 when this book was published. I continued to look for scientific evidence concerning Betty's and Barney's experience. And I have written an update to this book with all of the evidence that we have found to date, including new scientific evidence on Betty's dress, and also a scientific study that Dr. Don C. Donderi had done on symbols with individuals who had been on craft and had observed symbols. And Betty had actually sketched symbols that she had seen on the craft for me in the year 2000. And Dr. Donderi, after he had done his symbols study, saw those symbols in the first edition of Captured. They're in the second edition too. There's new information about the star map, updated with some new photographs, some new pictures, and new information. And of course, Stanton Friedman has passed away. And so I wrote a preface about Stanton as well. So I'm very excited about the 60th anniversary edition of Captured.
Yes, we are too, Kathleen. And something that niggled me, but I think you cleared up last time, was the fact that an artist or it was reported that the aliens with Betty and Barney, they were mistaken to have been wearing caps. But was it you who told us that it might well have been like a headset? Like we would have a modern day headset that we wear now that wasn't available then. Is that right in you stating that they might have been like some kind of headset they temporarily wore, being mistaken for caps, or do you think they were wearing caps to try and mask their difference?
I seriously doubt that they were wearing caps. Yes. The reason I say that is there was video taken of non-human entities on board craft that was taken off the coast of Turkey. And that video was analyzed in 5 different countries, and it was stated that it was authentic. It was not CGI, had not been developed in a laboratory. It was authentic video. And the entities on that craft, one of them appeared to be wearing a headset. And so possibly that's what Barney saw through the window of that craft, was that headset, because it looks a little bit like a cap, only there's something that comes down on the side. Yeah. I also have video that were taken by those 2 paranormal researchers that I just told you about, and their movie camera recorded these non-human entities coming into their environment. Really amazing video. But what we have is video of them wearing headsets as well. I think that might be what Barney saw.
I think that would make sense, Kathleen. I did think it's just a niggling question I kept thinking about. By the way, the artists who originally did them, I do love the paintings of them. I think there were a number of them done. They're actually fantastic paintings. But it did. I think you yourself mentioned that they might have been headsets. I tend to agree with you on that. Actually, yes, it would make actual perfect sense.
So, Kathleen, we're coming near the end of the show. And I just wanted to ask, where do you see your research taking you, Kathleen?
I don't look into the future. It seems that I am just kind of led in the direction that I need to go in. And what 3 friends who are members of the Mutual UFO Network's Experiencer Resource Team and I have decided to do is we're forming a support group via Zoom, an online support group now, and this is going to be for experiencers who have moved beyond fear. They've processed this information, and we're going to all work together to see what our next step will be. And so the group is called Awakening Souls. So if you go to the-awakening-souls.com, you'll reach our website where you can sign up and apply to attend our support group meetings. We'll have them once a month. But it might be pretty late for people in England. They're going to begin at 7 o'clock in the evening here in Florida, and you're 5 hours ahead of us.
Yes, that's right. Well, that sounds absolutely amazing, Kathleen, and I'm sure that a lot of people will benefit, not just through understanding or trying to come to terms with the experiences that they've gone through, but also a process of healing. And I think that's the most important thing, because we're seeing a complete transmutation that's taken effect on a remarkable level. And you, Kathleen, are very much involved with all of that research. So I just want to ask to let your listeners know, how can they get hold of you, Kathleen?
Well, go to my website. It's at www.kathleen.Marden, MARDEN.com. I have just updated the website. I am very proud of it. There are articles that you can read. You can get in touch with me there. And I'm also going to give information. I think I may have given information on how to get in touch with MUFON's experiencer resource team, because I have requests, dozens of requests every week to speak with people over the telephone. And I have to tell you, if I could do that, then I would not accomplish any of this good work that I'm doing, in the UFO community. And my goal is to continue to do my research so that people will have a better understanding.
That is amazing. And any new books in the pipeline, Kathleen?
Yes, I'm working on a new book, and it's going to be about my life, about the experiences that I've had, about my relationship with my Aunt Betty Hill, and my relationship with Stanton Friedman, what I learned from each of them, and my journey toward transformation in all of this, starting out as someone who was very frightened about the prospect of alien abduction, and had lots and lots of questions about my family and myself, to the point that where I am now, where I realize that there is so much more to this than I had ever imagined, including the interdimensional aspects of it.
Yes, that's what I'm very interested in that as well, Kathleen. I think that's wonderful. Do you know, I can't wait to buy that book. You better get typing quicker, Kathleen, because I want that copy.
Oh, well, I wish I could work on it more quickly, but I'm so tied up with so many things. I've been working on it for a year now, and I'm only on chapter 7. It's going to take a while.
Yeah, Kathleen, it's been such an honor to have you on our radio show again on Twin Souls. We were so excited to have you with us again. And just to let our listeners know, go out and buy Captured, the Betty and Barney UFO Experience, the 60th anniversary release, which is coming soon. And also Kathleen's latest book, Extraterrestrial Contact, What to Do When You've Been Abducted. They are amazing books, and it's a must. And we're all looking forward also, Kathleen, to your new book, which will be a real eye-opener for many of your fans and for those people that support and love you very much. So we just want to say thank you so much for coming on board.
Oh, and thank you. It was such a pleasure to talk with you again.
Oh, you are welcome, Kathleen. And that just leaves me to say to all of the listeners, you've been listening to Twin Souls, the esteemed Kathleen Marden, award-winning ufologist and author, lecturer, and TV host of many of the top-rated UFO programs. And stay safe and look to the stars.